Welcome to this first tutorial and an introduction to how to operate and use Data Guru, your tool for creating data connectors and transforms and reusable data workflows. First, let's go through the basic building blocks that you're going to need to know how to use and combine to accomplish your Data Guru projects. There are 4 basic building blocks involved with Data Guru. The first is called connections. Connections are how you will bring in and connect to external data sources, databases, and files. Once you connect to data sources, you can use those data sources to first import data into a database where you can work with it using an import adapter. After the data is in a database where you can use it, you can create transform filters, a variety of very useful blocks that can help you sculpt, join, filter, and transform the data. Once you've built building blocks, you'll combine these actions into something called a macro. And a macro is a visual workflow that you'll put together to show how these building blocks go together. Macros themselves can be recombined in a workflow construct to allow very complex programmatic structure and control over a variety of macros to enable truly intelligent, repeatable data workflows. Now let's go through each one of these sections in some more detail. In the connections, you'll notice in the menu up on the top of the section, you've got the ability to connect to several different sources. First, by clicking on this button, you connect to SQL Server databases, Access databases, ODBC, and SQLite. The other buttons on the connections allow you to connect to delimited files such as a text file or CSV, Excel, and you can connect to an entire workbook, and each sheet is going to get imported in as a separate connection. SAP, if you're online with your SAP system, you can connect to it to import data directly into your Data Guru project. And finally, you can refresh all the connection information to make sure it's current. Let's go ahead and add an initial data connection. I'm going to click on the new database connection. It's already found in my SQL Server SQL Express instance on my machine. So I'm going to go and browse through the databases that are available, and there's one called Tutorial My Workspace. By selecting that, it'll immediately add it into the Data Guru project that I've opened. I'm going to go ahead and connect to a couple of other file connections now. Let's browse on over, and I've located a file called transactionaldata.txt. Simply opening and selecting that makes it accessible to Data Guru. Clicking on Open allows it to scan the contents of the text file and get it ready for import. Once I click on OK, it's pulled the transactional file, the text file contents, into Data Guru where it can be used as a basis for workflows and for actions. If I click on the Excel button, I can browse on over to any Excel files that I have, select one of those, open. Data Guru scans the contents of that worksheet, tries to figure out what the structure is, and it's found it. And it's got 2 worksheets. When I hit OK, it's added that. With these data connections, if I double click to open one of these things, I can see what the subtables are. What are the tables available to me in each connection? If I open the transactional data.txt, for example, I can now see columns available. This allows me to browse through the contents of the text file to see if it's been imported correctly. It looks like it has. I think I'll go ahead and take a look at the Excel worksheets as well. That looks pretty good. And I'll look at the third table. And I'm about ready to go. I'm going to close these up. And what you notice, I've now got connections into a SQL Server database, a text file, and an Excel file at the same time. This is going to enable me to start building my building blocks, to pull that data in and combine it to get at the data that I really want, which is some kind of a synthesis of all of these sources. First, I'm going to begin with import adapters. If I right-click on import adapters, I see that I have the option to bring in data from a database connection into another database, data from an imported file, from an Excel spreadsheet, and from SAP. I'm going to go ahead and click on New Delimited File Import. And what you see here is the information about this action. You'll notice that it has already picked up that I've only got one file called transactional data. I can select that one as an input for this action. The output is going to go into my database space called Tutorial My Workspace. Now it's asking me for a table name. I'm going to go ahead and name this thing Database Imported Text File as a new table. I could change the mapping if I wanted to, but I'm going to import it just as is. I'll go save that. I can close it. I'm going to create a second import adapter called, we'll make this an Excel worksheet, and I'm going to go ahead and import my site master table that I had found, that worksheet in the workbook, and we're going to import customers. And I want to pull that into this output side, which is Tutorial My Workspace, and I want to create a new table called Excel Imported Customers. I'll save that. I have quite a bit of control and functionality if I open up the section on transform filters. When I right-click on this, I can see a whole list of various transforms and logical transformations for the data. Some of the most useful ones you'll see are things like being able to add a new column, being able to adjust the data in an adjustment transform, creating an aggregation transform, similar to an aggregate query in SQL. I can change the data types, alter table schemas. I can create if-then based on the presence or absence of data, create new files, new tables. One of the other things we'll use a lot of is join transforms. So, in fact, I'm going to create a new join transform. And a join transform allows me to take two tables of data, combine them on a column that's the same in each table, and then create a new table where all of the data is joined together and I can access it at the same time. Let's see an example. In the Tutorial My Workspace, I've got my new transactions, and I've also got my customers. I want to output this into a new table called Combined Data Table. And the configuration here, if I say transactions is table 1, customers is table 2, and I set up my join on the same data that's in each table. In this case, destination ID happens to be a column of data that has common meaning in each of the tables. That gives me sort of a key or a hash to be able to know how to connect the data in these separate tables. I'm going to go ahead and just grab a few data columns here that I want to output in my new table. Destination ID, store, ship quantity, ship date. That's plenty. I save it. I close it on off. I've now got a couple of blocks. Defining actions and blocks is that second building block that you're going to need in Data Guru. How do I get these things to combine and work together? That is where I'm going to access a visual macro. If I open up the macro section and right-click and say New Macro, what you see is a visual canvas for combining building blocks. And there's a lot of ways to interact with this. We're only going to do a short overview here. The Start button is just what it says it is. That's where we're going to start the data flow. We've already defined a couple of building blocks, so what I'm going to do is take the building blocks I've defined. In this case, an import adapter to import a text file, an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm just dragging it and dropping it on over here in my workspace, my visual space, so I can create a flow of actions. Now once I've imported my text file and imported my spreadsheet, the next thing I wanted to do was do a join. So I'll drag that block over here as well. And what you can see, if I zoom out a little bit, it's a fairly simple, straightforward workflow. It's going to proceed one step after the other. And how do I make it work? I come up here and click on the Execute button, and Execute is going to start at the Start button and work its way down. As you can see, the macro has executed. And if I go on over here to Tutorial My Workspace, I can see I've created a whole variety of new tables, including this one I wanted, the Combined Data Table. I can open that guy up, browse through it. There we go. The last building block in DataGuru is something called a workflow. A workflow is how I can combine multiple macros together. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this introductory tutorial. Suffice to say, let me reset the workflow, save my macro, and now if I wanted to create a workflow to run several macros, I can drag and drop these guys right on the workflow visual space and set up a more complicated flow of a combination of macros I've put together. This concludes your basic overview and tutorial on the parts and pieces in DataGuru. Each of these will be covered in future sections and future tutorials. I hope this was helpful, and happy transforming.